You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm your host, Dmitri, the founder and CEO of Rock, Paper, Scissors, the PR and marketing firm that specializes in music innovation and music technology companies. And today we're going to dive deep into what our guest calls the third phase of music disruption. The first couple of phases had to do with how people listen to music. And this phase, which focuses on artificial intelligence, has to do with how people are interacting with music. Ian Henderson is the founder of MashApp, a platform that enables anybody to remix tracks without any production experience. It's a real simple user interface. And I'm super excited because he secured licenses from all three major record labels and Cobalt at launch, which is unheard of for a startup. So we dive into the broader context of these technological disruptions happening in the music industry driven by AI and focus specifically on his journey to launch MashApp. We also hear the news from me and Tristra. Let's get into that now.
Rock, paper, scanner.
Yes, that's right. We are back with the Rock, Paper, Scanner News Roundup. It's an email newsletter that you can get every week, every Friday in your inbox. But here on the podcast, we just like to break down a few articles, maybe list a couple headlines, just so if you haven't had a chance to read this week, you have it in your earballs. So here we are. Tristra's here with me. Hey, Tristra.
Hey, Dmitri. I am excited to talk about news. My favorite thing.
You're good at looking at news and ingesting what's happening in the industry, but then also helping us get one step further. So I'm excited to see what you've picked out.
Yes, I've got some news of the weird from the tech world.
And I've got some news of the industry, and I want to just go through a handful of quick articles just to mention them. And then I've got just a couple I want to dig in ever so slightly. But the first one that caught my eye was from Glenn Peoples at Billboard, why music investors aren't worried about slowing streaming and revenue growth, because there is a plateau that's happening. Growth is still happening. Like streaming and revenue is higher this year than it was, or 2024 than it was 2023, but it is starting to grow at a slower rate. But he put together some great quotes and conversations from various people in the industry about, yes, but it's still good. So that's nice to hear, including our buddy Mark Mulligan. I do want to tell our listeners that in an upcoming episode, I do interview Glenn Peoples about investment in music, and I do interview Mark Mulligan about the numbers that he looked at from 2024. So
Glenn's been doing some really valuable reporting now about music and the markets with the great, shall we call it, economic uncertainty that we're experiencing. I'm really grateful for Glenn's analysis, and I think everyone should go check it out.
Yeah, and I'm keeping an eye on this because I still love that topic of music is a recession-proof investment. And so we'll see where that goes to.
Test your thesis, hopefully. Or not. Actually, I hope you cannot test your thesis in 2025.
And it's not my thesis. I've heard other people say it, and I think it's pretty cool. From Music Business Worldwide, there was a title, Amazon makes last-minute bid for TikTok as U.S. ban deadline looms. By the time this podcast runs, we might know more about what's going on with TikTok, but I can't believe how many companies have made bids for it, and how
Dmitri, did you put in your bid? Did you put in your bid yet?
Exactly. I put a small bid in as well. Just grooving through here, music industry reacts to executive order on ticket scalping from Hypebot. Some feedback from the industry, they say, including Kid Rock and our buddy Randy Nichols, and industry pundit / Krabby Man Bob Lefsetz.
Go Bob.
Weird to see this executive order to come out right now. Changing topics completely, another Music Business Worldwide headline was China's $6 billion valued Kunlun Tech debuts world's first music reasoning model, claims it can outperform Suno. Just a reminder, Tristra, that there's stuff happening in China that we haven't even figured out that it exists, let alone the impact that's going to have.
Oh, absolutely. And it'd be interesting to see how a reasoning model approaches music and what the different outcomes are. Hopefully we can address that in a future episode. That'd be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also just goes to show whatever happens legislatively here in the United States, there's still a whole global conversation to be had.
So true.
On a similar topic, sorta, Music Business Worldwide had a headline this week. Udio, the startup sued by record companies last year, unveils tool to clone sonic identity of existing songs.
It's like they didn't have enough. Their lawyers just don't have enough to do.
They're gonna keep going. That's the thing. They're gonna keep saying this is fair use. There's all these different approaches. Oh, fine, you don't want us to train on anyone else's data, then let them upload user-generated content and see what happens there.
Oh, wow. This is going to get really interesting really fast.
Yeah. Okay, those were my quickies. I've got two that I just wanted to mention from two sides of the market, the music market too. Music Business Worldwide, again, 5 million songs and $288 million spent on catalogs. 8 things we learned from Universal Music Group's 2024 annual report. Just wanted to dig into this one a little bit because they made it so easy with 8 bullets that I could recite. But also,
thank you, Music Worldwide.
yeah, I mean, there's also UMG has had all kinds of news coming out with their acquisition of Downtown and the switch to artist-centric payouts and renegotiations with various DSPs and platforms and so forth. But it is interesting to see that from a financial standpoint, it seems to be working. So Tristra, these are the 8 things that our friends Tim Ingham and crew at MBW said came out of that. Catalog sales accounted for 66% of UMG's recorded music sales streaming revenue in 2024. That's defined as music older than 3 years. And it's a continuation of a long-time trend. But back in 2018, the balance between catalog and frontline for UMG's digital recorded music revenues was much closer to parity, 54% of catalog, 46% frontline. So catalog is growing.
That doesn't surprise me, yeah. But that's also that's concerning maybe for the long-term health of music. Or maybe it isn't. Change my mind. That could be, it's an interesting question.
The catalog, as time goes on, recorded music catalog gets bigger and bigger.
Of course, it's going to take up more and more proportionally. But the question is are people going to get tired of listening to the same old songs? But though we've had decades of data saying maybe not, or like younger people can keep engaging with older music in interesting ways.
Exactly. And there's more and more derivative content, whether it's in video form or samples, or who knows what this next phase will be, which points to some possibilities for AI too. Number 2, UMG now generates 52% of its recorded music revenue in North America. Let's see. Lucian Grange said, in early 2024, we executed on our vision to realign our U.S. label structure, and within months, we were operating with greater agility and efficiency. MBW says the North American market represented just 39% of UMG's global recorded music revenues back in 2014. So from 39% 10 years ago to 52%, America still seems relevant.
Yeah.
UMG's music publishing catalog now contains 5 million owned and administered titles, around 1 million more than 2 years ago. So publishing continues to be relevant, and UMG is growing on the publishing side as well. This one might be related to that catalog stuff, but UMG's top 50 artists accounted for just 24% of its recorded music revenue in 2024.
Wow. So more diversification and moving away from like a big ass hits structure to a broader catalog that people are engaging with, but not in that crazy millions and millions and millions of streams.
Yeah.
For a track. Yeah. Interesting.
Yep.
Or billions.
Just a few more from this article. UMG's catalog acquisition spending jumped to $288 million in 2024. It spent a further 9-figure sum to buy stakes in various companies. And let's see, that's a year-over-year jump in catalog M&A spending was primarily due to the timing of deals, is what it said. It's almost like, this wasn't a strategic change. This was just things finally closed, maybe.
Yeah. Interesting.
UMG employs over 10,000 people across more than 60 territories. That's a slight increase in employees from the previous year not by much, 50 more people. But in a time where we were looking at lots of layoffs in the music industry, it's interesting to see that there was actually growth there. Artist costs reached $5.9 billion in 2024, an increase from $5.6 billion, which is not a huge increase from 2023. But this is royalty expenses, advances, write-downs. But they're still spending money on artists. That's good if you're growing catalog and if you're growing signings and things like that. And finally, UMG now speaks to an owned audience of over 200 million fans thanks to superfan-driven D2C investments. So this is owned audience. These are people that are going to 1,000 artist stores globally to help UMG guide more direct-to-consumer revenue.
That is very interesting. I think that is the most interesting factoid you pointed out there.
Awesome. Well, cool. Thanks for going through that. I was also going to point out, although I'm taking too much bandwidth here, I was going to point out a Billboard story. It was actually in a couple places. Music Watch, the market research firm, Glenn Peoples covered this at Billboard. 50 million more Americans are buying music than a decade ago. And there's a couple of other stats within that are pretty interesting. I won't spend too much time on this, but he says, first of all, the U.S. population is increased over that period by 19 million. So that's a little bit of the growth, but that's not all of it. Half of all Americans, adults basically, paid for a subscription in 2024. And not only are more Americans spending money on music, but they're spending more money. He says per capita, about 10% more. Americans typically spent $112 per capita in 2024 versus $102 in 2023. So that's heading in the right direction. And live music spending fared even better than recorded music, jumping 17% to $281. There's some ticket inflation from some of that, but not all of it. The percentage of people who bought a ticket rose to 56% from 51% in 2023. And spending on merch, such as t-shirts, rose 45%, which is pretty good.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And that plays into the sort of D2C story that Universal's annual report was telling in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Which is interesting. Anyway, Tristra, you expand us even further. Tell us what articles you're looking at.
I'll be quick. I just got a couple of fun things to throw people's way. And these may, actually, the first one is extremely relevant to the music industry. And namely that this is from Deadline from earlier last week when this airs. Inside YouTube's weird world of fake movie trailers and how studios are secretly cashing in on the AI-fueled videos. So this story has already shifted, so I think there's been some renegotiation of this, and YouTube has shut some of this down. However, I think we're at a really interesting inflection point when rights holders are going to want to make the most of these kind of deep-faked IP and user AI-generated UGC. So what this indicates to me, though, is there's this really interesting tension between what fans want to make and what people want to see out there and how people want to monetize it. And yet there's still this question of should everything have a certain degree of truthiness, so to speak. And so that this article from Deadline is super interesting and just it's definitely worth a read, and looking at all these crazy, mostly from the Marvel Universe or superhero movies, though I think there was also a fake Inside Out trailer. So people are getting really creative with these trailers, and the studios are kind of like, okay, that's cool. This is enabling fandom, but it's gotten a little bit more complicated since then. I thought it was such an interesting story.
Yeah, and, the fan fiction of movie trailers. And then instead of saying, hey, stop that, block that, take it down, that's derivative, blah, 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 monetize it.
Exactly. Okay, cool. You guys are going to do this anyway, so we might as well monetize it. Another interesting piece that I came across was from the MIT Press Reader, which is the anti-capitalist case for standards. And all you capitalists out there, don't feel alienated. Don't let that clickbaity title fool you. They're talking about things like DDEX or having the same charging cable protocol or having the same codec or something like that, right? So what's really interesting, I think, is that we often think about innovation as functioning best in an extremely competitive environment. That's how you turn the market on. That's really how you get like the invisible hand to start functioning properly out there. But what I think is really important here is that there needs to be a countervailing force that allows us to come to some agreements and cooperate when it comes to technical standards. And that actually can unleash more innovation and is way better for consumers. So having some kind of metadata standard that nobody understands or sees in music, for instance, does improve search. It improves discovery. It improves so many things in the user experience, as well as ensuring that royalties get paid to the right place, that you don't have dupes, that you don't have weird fakes and just other strange things going on. But I thought this piece was really interesting because often standards are working best when we don't think about them, right? Just like public health measures. But when they don't work well, and when you have something like the VHS versus Betamax war and consumers have to take sides, you end up with a lot of inefficiency, right? So instead of that, maybe we should consider standards and a less kind of competitive view where we all try to converge on standards as soon as possible. I don't know. Fun piece.
Yeah. I think it's interesting about the relationship between standards and markets and communities coming together around that as a foundation for trust. Because what you're saying when there's format wars, consumers start to lose trust in an industry because they're like,
Yeah.
wait, I just invested in all this and now this, or I thought this was going to work and now I thought this cable was going to work or this protocol was going to work and then it doesn't. Yep. I love going 10,000 feet up. Trisha loves going 100,000 feet up.
I'm best in orbit.
Those are some great articles you brought in. I think I got to go back to reading the newspaper now.
All right, I'm gonna go and listen to my Victrola.
Sounds good. Thanks, Trisha.
All right, bye.
What makes news in music tech? Find out at our next Seismic Activity online event taking place April 23rd at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. UK time. We'll be joined by expert journalists to go behind the scenes to understand how journalists and editors work, what gets their attention, and what happens next. Head on over to musictectonics.com/online events to register now and learn more about our free monthly online event series.
Now for our feature interview.
Ian Henderson is the founder of MashApp and a former Spotify executive who's focused on redefining how people interact with music. After spending the last 4 years navigating the intricacies of music licensing, he recently launched MashApp to give music fans the tools to create and remix their favorite tracks. MashApp, it's an innovative app that allows anyone to step into the role of DJ and create their own music mashups using tracks from major labels like Universal, Sony, Warner, and Cobalt, with no production experience required. With an intuitive interface and a social component for sharing and discovery, MashApp makes it easy for anyone, regardless of skill level, to remix their favorite songs and join a community of other creators. Ian, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Dmitri, thanks for having me, and thanks for that great intro and description of MashApp.
Oh, I'm really excited about what you're doing because I think it's the timeliness of what you've done. I mean, it's funny. We'll talk about this. It's been a long time in the making, but in terms of announcing this app now is so relevant to what's happening in the industry. In fact, let's talk about the context. We'll dive in. You have a deck that I saw for MashApp that has a slide that caught my eye, and I wanted to ask you to explain it. From about 1999 to 2003, there was a huge disruption of music that you call the unbundling of the album business model, which is a great way to put it. That was Napster breaking everything, and then iTunes coming back, rebuilding a business model around singles. And then you say from 2005 to 2011, YouTube came along and pushed free on-demand streaming. There was some other stuff going on at the same time, but that was the big one. And then Spotify came back and rebuilt a business model around on-demand music. You worked at Spotify, so you know how that went. But you say now that we're in this third major tech disruption of music of the past three decades. What is the disruption you're talking about?
This disruption is about artificial intelligence, of course. The first disruption in like the late 90s, early 2000s was about the MP3 format. And the second disruption in like the mid to late 2000s was about on-demand streaming, really free on-demand streaming. This new disruption is about artificial intelligence. If the first disruption was led by Napster and the second disruption was led by YouTube, this disruption, I think, is led by companies like Suno and Udio. But I also think this disruption started maybe as early as 2019 when startups like Moises started letting music fans and DJs use artificial intelligence to pull their MP3 files apart into multi-tracks, into stems, into like vocal only or instrumental only versions. I think that's when the interactive AI-powered music interactivity revolution started.
Yeah. And in that case, they were sort of using it for their own like personal use to learn how to play a song or understand the mechanics of a song, et cetera. They weren't doing anything commercially with it at that point.
I think DJs were already starting to make their own remixes, and you needed to have a lot of music knowledge to use these tools and to make remixes. One of the big visions of MashApp, as I think we'll get into, is to let anybody be able to be a music creator and play with these new tools.
That's a really good point because we're talking about format shifts in a way. And let's get into that. How is this disruption with AI different than these past disruptions we just identified?
Yeah, this disruption is really different. If the first two disruptions were about how music fans access music and how they pay for music, how they pay to listen to music, if the first two disruptions were about really new ways to do old things, listening and paying, this new disruption is about people being able to interact with music in a completely different way. AI lets people lean in and, as we just talked about, pull music apart, but do all kinds of other things. So simply, this new disruption is about music becoming interactive.
Whoa. That is quite the statement in itself. I mean, I follow a lot of the stuff that's going on, but you just put it out very plainly about that interactivity, which is like a model for the future, really. If we watch how technology has shifted and then how consumers / fans / citizens, anyone out there is interacting with music, to say the music is interactive itself, now that the technology is catching up is really what you're saying. We can expect something very different, which makes us ask the question, if AI-powered music interactivity is this disruption, what's the business model solution? What's the Spotify or iTunes of AI music interactivity?
That is the big question, of course, right? And let me take that big question in two parts. Let me talk about what do we know already, and then let me tell you about like MashApp's vision.
Okay.
What we already know is that, like in the two previous disruptions, when fans show that they want to access music and use music in new ways, and when new technology companies make that a possibility, the music industry leans in and tries to find business models, tries to find ways to monetize these new music activities. And we can already see that happening. As you said at the top, MashApp, we announced our licenses with the major record labels in February. So the record labels are already licensing in this space. And of course, just like happened with Napster, the record labels are also going to have to engage in some litigation to enforce their rights to license these new sort of music activities. So what we already know is that the music industry is recognizing these new ways that music fans want to play with music, and they're leaning in and trying to find these business models. So what's MashApp's vision of what these new solutions might look like? Our mission, MashApp's mission, is to make music creation fun for non-musicians. And we think the way to create a mass market business where music fans have fun interacting with music is to let people play with their favorite songs. We think that when people can use AI-powered tools to interact with music that they hear every week on Spotify or on the radio, then that opens up music creativity to audiences who have never had the chance to be a music creator before. And MashApp's music, our user experience today is focused on helping people create mashups and remixes, but we have other plans. We've other ideas for how people will be able to lean in and play with music. And our business model vision is a freemium one. It's like Spotify's. We have a free app where you can create simple mashups and remixes. And then if you are starting to have a really good time and you want more creative tools, you want to create song length mashups, and of course, if you want less ads, you can subscribe to MashApp Plus and take your creativity to a whole nother level.
Gotcha. So people will be subscribing so they can do all these interactive things and be sharing with other users and friends and having a whole different kind of conversation as a result. And it'll be so interesting to see people are already doing it. We know that sped up and slow down versions are getting somewhere on the internet. This is empowering people to do it in a legal way, a way that compensates rights holders, which seems like a new revenue stream, which is pretty awesome. What is it? Let's back up a little bit. You mentioned a little bit about what we know so far, but what is the true fight between the AI music companies, the Gen AI music companies, and labels and publishers? What are the possible outcomes?
So the big question that's being asked right now about music and artificial intelligence is, do technology companies need the permission of record labels and music publishers to train AI models with music,
right,
with copyrighted music? And if you look at the music publishers' litigation against Anthropic, which is one generative AI company, or if you look at the recent controversy around the UK government's proposals around music and AI, in both these situations, the big question that's being debated is, do technology companies need label and publisher approvals to use copyrighted music to train AI? And so the two simple possible outcomes are, number one, technology companies are allowed to use music without permission, or number two, technology companies need to get music rights holders permission to train AI with their music.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I love you've really crystallized what the conversation is there. Which outcome do you think is most likely?
I personally think what's most likely is that the law holds up that technology companies need to get music rights holders permission to train AI models with copyrighted music. And why do I think that? I just think that we've already talked about technological disruptions come along all the time. And this isn't the first one the music industry has been hit with. And technological change has never negated the fact that artists and scientists and engineers and other creators should be paid for their work. So I think that the law will uphold that you need to get creators permission to use their creations and compensate those creators if that's what they want in return for their permission. I think the more interesting question is like, how is the music industry going to arrive at a business model to allow technology companies to use artificial intelligence to do all kinds of things with music? And I think that there's two potential scenarios here. One is it's just like an open market, and publishers and record labels are negotiating bilateral deals with different technology companies. That's one potential scenario. And the other scenario is that governments have to get in more involved, and statutory licenses or compulsory licenses are created, like you have with publishing rights and collecting societies in many countries around the world.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to unfold. And as the kind of political landscape shifts and the balance of powers, I guess, the court systems, all that stuff, it seems like it's a constant, like, moving target here. So it'll be interesting to watch. Something that I find really intriguing about you, Ian, and MashApp is that you've done deals with all three majors and Cobalt. This is unheard of. We have to take a quick break, but when we get back, I want to understand how you pulled this off. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. With the launch of MashApp, Ian, you did something that might be unprecedented. I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer. I don't track all the cases of what went down with who licensed what. But you launched with licenses in place with all three majors: Universal, Sony, Warner, and Cobalt. Given that labels and publishers have not made it easy for new startups to license music, how did you pull this off?
Before I answer your question, let me give you a little update. Yes, at launch, we had the three major labels and Cobalt Publishing. Universal Publishing was also on board at launch. And shortly after launch, Warner Chappell and Concord Music Publishing also signed deals with us. So we're super happy, thrilled,
licensed really,
to have support from both big record labels and big music publishers. But to answer your question, like, how do we pull it off? I think the first thing I have to say is that I, as an entrepreneur, have advantages in the music licensing space that most startup founders don't have. And that's that I worked for 7 years for Sony Music, negotiating licenses with technology companies like Spotify. And then I jumped to the other side of the table and I worked for Spotify for 4 years, negotiating deals with the major labels and with little record labels all around the world. I had a lot of relationships at the big record labels. Secondly, I have to say that even with all those relationships, it took a long time. I started these discussions in 2021. I signed the last deal I had to have to launch in late 2024. Maybe another answer to your question is I was patient. And the fact that somebody with my level of knowledge and relationships in music licensing, it took me so long. Number one, that's because I was dealing with a new area around using artificial intelligence with music. It was going to be a long discussion, but also I think it's not a great thing for the music industry that it takes somebody even with my level of knowledge so long to be able to get access to the rights. I think that that's something the music industry has to think about, whether that's right or whether there are ways to encourage more innovation. And then the last thing I think I'd want to say in answer to your question is that maybe the way I pulled this off has nothing to do with me. Maybe it's just that the music industry's view on artificial intelligence changed a lot between 2021 and 2024. I think the music industry started seeing that there were companies out there that were building their businesses and developing their technologies using music and not coming to the big labels and publishers and saying, let's have a discussion about what the user experience should be, what the business model should be. And when the music industry saw that that was happening, they're like, okay, well, people like Ian who are actually coming and trying to have a conversation with us about how music and artificial intelligence should be able to be used together in the short term and in the medium term, and what the business model should be around it. We should probably lean into these discussions because people like Ian are coming and trying to have a conversation with us.
No, it's interesting to think about the experience you have that got you here, as well as the lead time, as well as the ramp up time that it took, and that was still a long time. And I don't think it's solely how labels feel about AI, but also how labels and publishers feel about licensing new use cases. Like this, we don't know what's going to happen with these songs once they start mashing them up. Or it doesn't matter whether it's AI or not. It's just the fact that, how do you put this song with that song? How do you get pre-cleared licenses for this songwriter to be okay with their song with that songwriter, or whatever it is? It's not just because it's AI. It's also because it's just the end result is something that's never been licensed in that way before. And it is interesting for you to bring up the fact that you had the relationships, because honestly, most startup founders, especially if they haven't had, they're young or inexperienced, they haven't been in the music industry, they can go to the front door of a major label, but how many layers in do they have to get till they get to the group of people that actually are going to make the decision, or the group of people that are going to ask the hard questions that you have to answer before the people who are going to make the decision? So you probably got to those people faster, but then there's still that appetite for trying something new and trying something different. And then there's also the money it costs to license music or whatever those agreements are. So there's a lot of different factors there. And on the one hand, it's hopeful to see that MashApp was able to launch with all these amazing major label licenses. And on the other hand, when you say it's took 3-4 years, is it going to take another 3-4 years for the next founder to come along? I don't know. Hopefully it's thawing a little bit, because I think, as you said, it does create revenue opportunities for the entire music industry when people can, if they actually want to license music, they can actually license it, versus what will happen otherwise in your two scenarios that you painted as well. Ian, how does MashApp work? You talked a little bit about the people doing mashups and remixes, but tell us what the experience looks like so we can get a real sense of what it is you just launched and accomplished.
Yes. So as I think I mentioned earlier, our mission is to make it easy for non-musicians to be able to feel like music creators. And that's why we went out and licensed popular music, because we think in order to make this a mass market opportunity, people need to be able to play with their favorite music. And also really important is that we needed to make this process of creating mashups and remixes as simple as possible. So I like to think it's just like a 3-step process, maybe 3 big choices, and at every step, MashApp makes recommendations for you. The first step is you come in and you select a song, and we recommend songs to you, and you select the part of the song that you want to use, and you don't even have to know what a verse or a chorus is. Our AI will say hey, swipe right and left, and we've already picked those sections, the best sections of the songs to use. You just listen, have fun listening, and choose what you want to use. And then the next big step is, what version of the song do you want to use? This is where we do some really cool things with AI. You can basically say, I just want to use the vocals from this song. I just want to use certain instruments from this song. Mashups sound a lot better when you're not just stacking one whole song on another whole song, when you're taking some parts of one song and some parts of another song. So that's the second step. And then the last step is you choose the other song, and you make the same decisions we just talked about. And we recommend, our AI recommends songs that mash up well together. So I hope it's just a 3-step process, and we're making recommendations to make it easy for people at each step of the way.
Sounds like a blast. I've downloaded the app, and I need to cut this podcast short so I can go do some mashups real quick. But it's going to be so much fun. What will things look like for MashApp if it becomes successful? Where will this go from here?
So just last summer, we commissioned some of our own consumer research, and it showed that there are hundreds of millions of people around the world who want to lean in and remix and play with their favorite songs, and that a very significant percentage of those people are willing to pay for some sort of premium service. So that is a big, exciting opportunity. And so if MashUp is successful, then we will become a mass market international app that looks like some mix of a music streaming app and a social network, and will become a significant new revenue stream for the music industry. That's our goal.
That sounds good. It's the business model solution for interactive music right
exactly.
there. So let's say you reach that state of success, what will happen next for MashApp and for the world of fan remixes and music interactivity? Where will it go beyond just the business model?
Yeah, I think what you can do with music in terms of remixing music and interacting with music is going to continue to change and evolve. Right now, our license agreements with the big music companies allow us to do certain things with artificial intelligence to offer music fans certain types of creation tools. But we went and asked for a whole bunch of things, and the record label said, yeah, you can do these ones and you can't do these ones yet. And so there's a lot of new functionality we want to offer to music fans. We've got a great future product roadmap. And so if we're successful in building a big audience for MashApp and monetizing that audience, then I think that artists and their partners will get more comfortable letting companies like MashApp use artificial intelligence to offer fans more ways to interact with and play with their favorite songs. And artists and record labels will start to see this type of music interactivity as just another way to make money and another way that music fans express their love for their favorite artists.
Amazing. I'm super impressed. The simplicity of how you describe it is like brilliance. I'm almost mad at you that I didn't do it myself because it just sounds like it's the right time for this kind of creativity and this kind of interactivity. And yet it has an elegance to it. So congrats to you for getting it off the ground, getting those licenses in place. I can't wait to see what happens next. Ian, thanks so much for joining me on the Music Tectonics podcast.
Thank you, Dmitri.
Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have new episodes for you every week. Did you know we do free monthly online events that you, our lovely podcast listeners, can join? Find out more at musictectonics.com. And while you're there, look for the latest about our annual conference and sign up for our newsletter to get updates. Everything we do explores the seismic shifts that shake up music and technology, the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's my favorite platform. Connect with me, Dmitri Vitsa, if you can spell it. We'll be back again next week, if not sooner.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.